I have a question, Rabbi Amber.
Yes, please.
So, I don't know exactly how to say this, but okay. So, if it's true that the Jewish people have this, this spark of holiness, like this, there's something different about a Jew than a non-Jew.
Right.
Then you mentioned earlier that Jew that Jews are capable of the highest highs and the lowest lows. So like I'm kind of like curious about that because um if it's like, okay, so you're Jewish and it's like when you do something wrong, like I'm sure like even like probably like the worst person ever that's Jewish, so they probably have like this deeper sense of like, oh, I shouldn't do this. Like, you know,
Yeah, I
I,
want to correct. I didn't mean that they could do the worst things. I said that the highest high and lowest lows means that that's their stance in the world. That's their situation in the world.
oh,
I didn't mean
okay.
that they do the greatest things or the worst things. I didn't say. Now there is something to that, but not exactly that, because they don't do the worst things, because there are certain
Okay.
traits of a Jew that we literally say, if a person doesn't have these three traits, we question whether they're Jewish. A person is not a Rahman, not compassionate. With the Gemara says, you have to question whether they're actually Jewish. If a person is not a Baisha, is not embarrassed to do the wrong thing, you have to question whether they're Jewish, right? So, like people who spend 25 years in the psychologist's office to try to get rid of their sense of embarrassment when they do the wrong thing are trying to undo their being Jewish, because that's a fundamental trait of being Jewish. And the third one is the acts of kindness. So these are three traits that Jews, they do kindness, they're baishanim, they're embarrassed to do the wrong thing, and they're compassionate. Those are intrinsic natures, so much so that we say if someone does not demonstrate them, we have to question whether they are actually Jewish. So I didn't mean that Jews do the worst things. I didn't mean it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But what there is some truth to what you're saying is the Gemara says that there is certain things in the world that are brazen. Oz, they're very brazen. Like, for example, the rooster, it says, is the brazen amongst the animal, against the birds. It'll just go and do what it's got to do. We say leopards are brazen. The most brazen of all the nations is the Jews. Now, why is that? So the Maharal explains it by the story of Hanukkah, because they're the nation that fought us, and they were extremely brazen, were the Greeks. The reason why the Greeks are so brazen is because they're like, we have the wisdom. When a person feels that they have spiritual knowledge or intellect greater than someone else, then they have a certain strength that they take with them, right? Even if they're not as physically strong, but they have the part of the human being that is the mind, which is the greatest part. So the Jewish people, being that they have this power, this spiritual power, it also leads them to be very sometimes brazen in a positive sense. But there it could be in a negative sense sometimes. And that's why a lot of times you'll see, let's say, like, these bad philosophies, the isms, the communisms, whatever it is, they're created by misplaced Jews who want to use their minds to build something and create something, and they don't go in the way of Torah. Those guys create very powerful things that can be very negative. And the Gemara said Hashem had to give them the Torah, because without the Torah, they could really mess things up. I hate to say it, but if you look at some of the Jews who are saying things today, they're not doing the right thing, and they're so powerful because they're smart, and they don't, and not going the way of Torah. They're saying things that are very bad, and that can really mess things up very dramatically. So that's true.
Okay.
Now they do, because they don't do very low things, because they're baishanim, they're embarrassed, and they love to do kindness, and they're compassionate. And that's why you even see that the guys, like the terrible Jews of today, are guys who think that they're saving the world. I mean, that's what they do. They think that this philosophy is the most incredible because it's the new philosophy of true compassion for everyone. Wait a minute, you're screwing everything up. This is false, not true. but it's still coming from a place where they believe they're doing something good.
Okay, that clarifies it for me. Okay, that answers my question. So what are the three? So it's
Things are they do kindness, they're embarrassed to do the wrong thing by shonim, and they're Rahman, they're compassionate.
I see. Okay.
It's like funny. I tell people it's like if you go to Israel and like people in Israel sometimes are kind of gruff. They call them sabr. Sabr is a fruit that's soft and sweet on the inside and very prickly on the outside. But if a person has a problem and they're in danger, you don't want to be in America. You want to be in Israel. Because you can't have a situation like in America they passed this law called the Good Samaritan Act back in I forgot it was the 80s. There was a woman that was being beaten and raped and was going on for a very long time in New York City. Kitty, I forgot her last name, and nobody called the police. No one to get involved. In Israel, if somebody trips in the street, you can have 50 people around the person, taking care of them, because that prickly outside is not the real person. Inside there's tremendous compassion. So of course they're going to see someone that needs help. In Israel, it's much safer. You want to be there because they're not going to be like, okay, good, listen, it's not my business. I don't want to get involved. No one's going to do that.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Elisheva.
Rabbi, one of like the I'd say like Mebayesh, like the Baishan to be.
Yeah.
So is another definition would be humility, humble. I know.
It's really Baishan. And I know Baishan is not like such a nice compliment in the world today, but there's something called it's a natural response, and it says by Adam and Chava, it says, when they ate the tree of knowledge, they had busha, like bushashu, and that's because knowledge should create in you a sense of I'm naturally embarrassed to do the wrong thing. There's a certain sense of boshas punning. Your face is like, and the person who does something, they're embarrassed about it. The Gemara says embarrassing someone is like committing murder. What happens is their face first gets flush and red, means the blood rushes to the face, and they turn white. So embarrassment is a very, very powerful emotion, so powerful that a person who embarrasses someone loses their portion of the world to come. It's so serious. You don't want to embarrass people. And there are stories of people that would rather die than be embarrassed. Many stories like that. There's even a whole story in the Gemara. The Gemara calculates, I don't get into these details, but it talks about people who get the death penalty. And there's a whole discussion there of wearing more clothes, and less clothes would make it more painful, but less embarrassment. And it goes to this whole calculation of a person. So embarrassment is a very deep feeling, but it's connected with das, connected with understanding. Kids aren't embarrassed. They walk around naked. They're not thinking twice. But there's a certain, all of a sudden you have a certain understanding, and it's appropriate to be embarrassed. So embarrassment, although in this world it's really considered a trait that you need to go to your psychologist and get rid of as quickly as you can, which will be 25 years on the couch, and you're still not going to get rid of it. You shouldn't get rid of it. You should just use it properly and say, I shouldn't be embarrassed about things I'm not embarrassed about. That's a problem. Yeah. That's why I'll agree with people. Embarrassment is very bad to be embarrassed for things you shouldn't be embarrassed. King David said that I am a king and I will not be embarrassed. What does it mean? He said that he was a king and he would study Torah all night and praise Hashem all night, and then he didn't sleep. He slept for 20 minutes at a time. He dozed off. It says that he learned Torah all night, dozed off, and he had his what do you call it? A harp over his bed. And a northern wind came in at dawn, and it struck the harp, and he took the harp down, and it woke him up, and he sang praises Hashem until the morning. So all of the kings used to laugh at him. They said, like, you're not a king. The law is kings sleep until 3 hours a day. The kings don't get up for 3 hours, till 9 o'clock. It's not normal. The king's a king. So you're not a king, you're a slave. So King David said, I will speak your statutes in front of the kings, I'll not be embarrassed. So David was very brazen and not embarrassed, because brazen and embarrassment are two opposites. And so when you are supposed to be brazen, you're supposed to be brazen. And every trait has a positive way to use it. To stand up like King David and say, I'm not embarrassed, I'm going to in your face and say, I'm serving Hashem, that's good. So to be embarrassed when you should be is appropriate. To be embarrassed when you shouldn't be is bad. That does need treatment. Good point, Hashem. But I mean, I didn't want to, because humility is like, you may be right that maybe humility is some kind of subcategory of it, but I didn't want to say that because it's a whole another world. It may overlap to a certain degree, but the Chazal doesn't say that. It says busha. So I don't want to add so much the idea of humility, because I think that embarrassment could even possibly be to a person who's not very humble, but he still knows he did the wrong thing. He'll still feel embarrassed. So I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. I don't think they are. Very good point, though. Good. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
When King Ahasuerus started to realize that Mordecai was doing good to him and Haman was the evil one,
Right.
did he do any type of real teshuva, or did he just realize it for his own personal benefit?
That's a good question. We're going to see that in the last chapter of, I'm going to leave that because we'll see it next week, where there's a hint. Did Ahasuerus do any level of tshuva? It's a good question, because, I mean, he should have. He should have been, we're all reading the story and we're finding, wow. But he knows it. It's like, it's one of the things that when the bad people do things, they in a certain way can praise Hashem more because they know all their intent. It says that when in every generation, the nations want to kill us, and Hashem, he prevents their intentions. But we have a hard time appreciating that because we don't know what they're thinking. They know what they're thinking. So when it doesn't work out, they should be saying, wow, how does it work that every time we want to mess the Jews up and it doesn't happen? So Ahasuerus, we're going to see he does not get the lesson. But should he have? He should have. Yeah. We'll see what good comes out of him. But we don't see any place in Chazal. I'll show you next week an indication that some of the sages tell us that he really didn't learn any of his lessons. Yep, some people do, some people don't. All right, wonderful, guys. All right, next week will be the last class we'll hopefully finish the book of Esther, and then we'll take it for some more good Torah learning. All right, have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.